Alright, so we're going to start out here with number 57, and we're radiusing and leveling the fretboard. And I always do this with the fretboard in place, meaning attached to the neck and to the body, so that any sort of slight ramp that we get at the fretboard tongue or elsewhere can be leveled out, and we can have a dead flat fretboard from nut to fretboard tongue. Now, later on in the process, we're going to put a slight ramp into the fretboard tongue. This is called fallaway, but for now, I'm only concerned with leveling the board. And ordinarily, this takes a great deal of time, but what's nice is on this zebra wood fretboard, it actually goes quite quick. Hey guys, so I just radiused the zebra wood fretboard here of guitar number 57, and I want to do a little experiment here because before I start fretting this fretboard, I want to do a test on a piece of scrap. I have a little piece of scrap of zebra wood right here. I'm going to radius this tiny piece just like this is radiused. I'm going to cut, well actually first I'm going to cut the fret slots. I'm going to cut some random fret slots in here. They don't have to be square or, you know, of a correct distance from each other. Just I'm cutting some test slots. I'm going to cut those. I'm going to radius this, I'm going to install some fret wire, and then I'm going to apply a finish over this tiny mimic of a fretboard here. And that's just because this is a very unusual wood. It has super large pores, and finishing on a fretboard is also an unusual thing. Some people do it, particularly on maple fretboards. I've never built a guitar with a maple fretboard or of any type of fretboard that requires a finish. I've always built using woods that don't actually require a finish. They have a hard enough wear surface to begin with. Ebony, rosewood, etc. So in this case though, I'm going to have to be finishing this fretboard, and I want to see ahead of time how that's going to come out. So that was good. That was the first kind of test there, because I was curious as to whether, when I hammered these in, whether they would imprint a little bit on the surface of the softer wood here, because zebra wood is a lot softer than ebony or rosewood. And I kind of expected that if I really wailed on it with the hammer, that the fret wire would just imprint down onto the wood a little bit, but that is not the case, not at all. So great. Now let's apply a little finish to this and see how that goes. So I'm assuming I can just wipe the finish right over the wire and the wood itself, and everything will be just fine that way, but I don't know. We'll have to see. And one more thing before I apply the finish to my test piece. I simply need to take the edges off of the fret wire and add the bevel to the fret wire for the most accurate and realistic simulation of what it's going to be like to finish over this fretboard. I really don't want the sharp ends of the fret wire grabbing onto the cloth and tearing it and leaving bits of lint and cloth in the finish. I applied the True Oil to my test piece, 4 coats of True Oil in the manner that you see me doing here, and in the end, everything came out great. The test was a success. This is a go for applying finish to my zebra wood fretboard. So on this occasion, I'm actually working on 2 different guitars in tandem. So I'm going to now switch back to guitar number 56 and work on the radius there to catch it up to what we just did on guitar number 57. Sometimes I will only be working on just one guitar at a time, but sometimes I find this workflow of 2 in tandem to be kind of nice. But hey, to each his own. Everybody's got to figure out their own workflow, try different things out, try batching out more guitars altogether, see if you like the efficiency gains that you get with doing that, or alternatively, try just working one guitar from start to completion and see if you like the, well, really it puts you in a better headspace and allows you to be more focused on just this one product without getting too tangled up in the weeds. So it's at this point, after the radius is established, that I install the mother of pearl fret marker dots. I don't do this earlier simply because I want to make sure that they're deeply embedded in there, so it just makes sense to wait until the fretboard is pretty much at its final shape. As you can see with this last mother of pearl dot that I'm installing here at the 12th fret, the hole just happens to be a little bit extra deep. So my solution for that, simple enough, is just to stack 2 dots on top of each other. Very easy, very reliable. And hey, these fret marker dots are pretty cheap. I mean, you wouldn't want to waste a ton of them. I think they're about $1 each, maybe. Who knows? The price of everything is going up right now. Might be different by the time you see this. But as of right now, it's still cost effective, I'd say, to just stack dots on top of each other. Although you could always backfill with some other material. Returning to number 57, I'm taking a look at the flatness of the board from nut to fretboard tongue, and this is dead flat. Now I want to put some fallaway into the fretboard tongue itself. It can't be overstated that this is a truly small amount of relief that I'm putting into the tongue here. Literally just 1/1000th of an inch or 2/1000ths of an inch. No more than that. The fallaway should be subtle. The fret slots are all given a slight bevel with a triangular needle file prior to hammering the frets in. What this does is it relieves the top edge of the fret slot just a little bit so that if you're removing your fret wire, which you might be doing as part of your process here or further down the road as a repair, not at all uncommon to have frets removed. If you have that top edge beveled just slightly, it mitigates the problem of chip out when you're pulling that tang up out of the slot. Beveling the edge makes it less likely that the tang is going to catch on the edge and pull up a chunk. Arguably, the most important part of fret slot preparation is checking the depth of your fret slots and deepening them if necessary. I usually only have a couple of frets that need to be deepened in this manner, if any at all. As my depth checker tool, I'm using a little piece of fret wire that I've cut off and filed the studs off of the tang so that it fits easily into the fret slot. As per usual, I'm using Evo Gold for the fret wire. It's a lot more durable and harder than nickel silver, though not as hard as stainless steel. So your tools don't get all chewed up, but also your frets themselves don't get all chewed up over time through playing, like you see on your typical nickel silver fret wire. It's kind of like the best of both worlds, like a Goldilocks fret wire. The hammer I'm using, of course, is not just any hammer. It is a small dead blow hammer with a brass head. If you were to use just a regular carpenter's hammer, the steel is too hard for the Evo Gold fret wire, or if you were doing nickel silver, it would definitely be too hard, and you would leave impressions all over your frets. Furthermore, the dead blow aspect of the hammer means that there's some shot in the head of the hammer, which significantly reduces recoil when you're hammering in the frets. And with fret installation, recoil is the enemy. This big piece of gear that I'm strapping onto the guitar right now, by the way, is called the fret buck. It came into being from the Taylor factory. You can now buy it from Stu Mac, possibly other places, and what it does is it prevents, or reduces I should say, recoil when you're fretting over the body. Because honestly, if you were trying to design something to create the most recoil possible, you couldn't do much better than the acoustic guitar sound box. So really, fretting over the sound box is a bit of a nightmare unless you have some solution like this. So later on, the excess fret ends that are sticking out right now will be nipped off with a pair of nippers, and the remaining fret wire will be filed flush with the fretboard. However, these two last frets that are in this little scoop I have here, I have to actually do some pre-work here to shape these as close to their final shape as possible, so there's a minimal amount of filing that I'll have to do in this difficult area. And hopefully if I do a really good and accurate job here, I won't have to do any extra filing in that area after it's installed. It'll just be perfect and flush, just as it is. I'm even going to deburr the sharp edges of this fret piece before I install it. Anything I can do to minimize the time that I have to spend in that difficult scoop makes for nicer and cleaner work. So at this point, I'm not done with the fretboard or with the fretwork, far from it, but before I do further work on the frets here, I'm actually going to jump over to the bridge and get started on gluing the bridge down, which means I get to remove all this tape here, which was protecting it. Don't really need it anymore, and it actually gets in the way for gluing down the bridge. So I always like this step right here. I always have to slow myself down a little bit when I'm doing the fret work or hammering in the frets, just because I can tell that I'm always anxious to take this paper off just so I can see how good the guitar looks with the new fret wire on there. So I always feel like I gotta slow myself down because I'm just excited to see how it all comes together. And it looks pretty cool. And likewise, let's hop over to the other guitar that I'm working on at the same time here, with zebra wood on the neck and fretboard and tiger myrtle everywhere else, and redwood as the top. So this tape is extremely low tack. I get it from Stu Mac, and it does not pull up fibers. With other tape, you know, you have to pull it at a really low angle to make sure you don't pull up any fibers. With this, I don't even really have to worry about that. I mean, I'm not just gonna bikini wax rip it off, but still, pretty much no matter what I do, it just does not pull up fibers. Again, it's very low tack. Wow, I really like what the gold is doing to this guitar. I think this guitar really needed another color on it to add a little bit of contrast. So having the gold and the mother of pearl definitely helps. Before returning to fretwork, I'm going to do a number of things to the bridge, including radiusing the mating surface of the bridge to conform with the top, locating it, gluing it down, but all of that is a bit unrelated to our fretwork here. So let's get back to the task at hand. So what I'm doing here is giving my fretwork a little bit of insurance. What I'm doing is I'm gluing in each piece of fret wire with super glue. The super glue just gives a little bit of hold to keep that fret wire in place over time, because over time there's a tendency, not always but often, for the fret ends, the very end of the fret wire where it meets the fretboard edges, there's a tendency for that to lift just a little bit and release itself. And it's worse the more radius that you have on the board. So everybody who does this a somewhat different way, but the idea is the same. We just want to run a little bit of glue into the fret slots for a little extra insurance. So it takes a little bit longer, but I go fret by fret individually gluing in each fret like this. It just comes out better that way than if you try to sort of use a method that tackles them all at once. On this next fret, I'll give you the play-by-play of what I'm doing. So this first thing that I'm putting down is not the glue itself, that's actually the paste wax. And the paste wax is there to resist the glue and make sure it doesn't make a big mess on the fretboard. Now I'm running the glue after I've put the clamp on. And I keep these little pieces of paper towel nearby to very quickly pick up the excess. And it comes off nice and clean because it's sitting on top of that paste wax. And the last thing I did there was the accelerator, which cures the glue instantly, although I still wait about 15 seconds at least before taking off the clamp. And then I clean it up real quick, that individual fret, with some 4/0 steel wool. Any residual super glue that's left on the surface comes up much cleaner and more easily if you tackle it right away rather than waiting until you've gone across the entire board. Next, I nip back the overhanging fret ends and file the tangs until they're flush with the fretboard. I then angle the file to create the bevel. The fret ends are then deburred with a special fret end file that you can get from StewMac. And then lastly, as I alluded to much earlier on, we have to deal with these two little pieces of fret wire that are down in the scoop. I simply use a curved needle file such as the one you see here, and just very carefully bring in the last little bit of overhanging tang on the frets.
If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.